Our next speaker is a pediatric infectious disease specialist. She completed her undergraduate degree from the University of the Philippines, Bachelor of Science, major in biology. Graduated Doctor of Medicine from the University of the East, Ramon Magsaysay Memorial Medical Center, and finished her pediatric residency training at Long Island College of Medicine Hospital in New York. She took even further studies at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Montefiore Hospital, Children's Hospital in New York, USA. Our guest speaker is a fellow of the Philippine Pediatric Society and a diplomate of the American Board of Pediatrics. She is likewise a fellow of Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines. She is affiliated to St. Luke's Medical Center, Quezon City, and Global City alike, Asian Hospital Medical Center, and Cardinal Santos Medical Center. Our guest speaker held positions as head, Section of Pediatric Infectious Disease, St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City, and Quezon City, and head, Infection Control Services at both medical centers. She is likewise a residency training committee member at the St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City. Our distinguished speaker is a member of the Philippine Pediatric Society, Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines, Philippine Hospital Infection Control Society, Society for Healthcare and Epidemiology of America, and the Infectious Disease Society of America. She has a long list of national and international research and publications credited to her name. Dear parents, friends, and colleagues, let us all give a warm welcome to our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Josephine Navoa-Ng.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Melodine, for the kind introduction. I am honored to be here this morning to share with you information on how medical practice is being done. I'm actually very happy that Dr. Lacson spoke about a lot of the things because really the entirety of what we do in the hospital cannot fit 30 slides. But like what Melodine said, I'm an infectious disease specialist, also an infection control specialist. So I can answer any question outside the topic with regards to how to handle your PPEs, what's best to use in your houses, disinfectants, even the vaccines. So let me share my slides and go on with the lecture. Can you see my slides?
Yes, po.
Okay, let me just present it. So again, thank you very much. So I hope you can type in your questions at the end so that we can I can answer your concerns. So I'm going to discuss medical practice during the time of the pandemic. And just to let you, wait, let me just remove the picture. So, okay, so as we know, we all know and are aware of the problem right now. We're in a pandemic, and we know this is a new virus that came from Wuhan that's caused by SARS-CoV-2. So we have been witness on how this affected our lives for almost a year now. So I'm hoping to talk about how this virus or pandemic affected the world and discuss how we adjusted in medical practice and also our experiences and insight on the topic. And hopefully at the end, answer your questions about this and some other issues. So by definition, we are in a pandemic, and a pandemic happens when an outbreak of infectious diseases that occurs over a wide geographic area. Which has high prevalence and generally affecting a significant proportion of the world's population, usually occurring within several months. So we all know that definition is appropriate for what we are going through now. Outbreaks and pandemics have actually occurred several times in our history, and I just listed down the top 10 pandemics in the world. And probably the worst would be what we call the Black Death. I don't know if your parents or lola told you about this. It happened in the 1300s, affecting all continents, Europe, Africa, and Asia, called the bubonic plague, and actually killed a third of the world's population. So pandemics like this happen every 100 years, as Dr. Laxon said. The flu pandemic actually approximately happened 100 years ago. So why does this happen? We all know that the SARS-CoV-2 virus is a new virus in terms of our immune system. We are naive of this virus because the entire genetic composition of this is not the same as the usual SARS-CoV or coronaviruses that we see. There are a lot of coronaviruses, and most of this will just cause you benign respiratory symptoms. And there are those strains that actually infect animals and not humans. So what happened here was that an animal coronavirus learned or adapted and learned how to infect humans. So there were two other significant coronaviruses that happened in the past, which we went through as well. This would be your SARS-CoV-1 and the MERS-CoV, both coming from animals as well. SARS-CoV-1 from the civet, MERS-CoV from the camels. And right now, SARS-CoV-2 is thought to come from bats, as well as some of its genetic material came from what we call the pangolin. So there are minor coronaviruses that caused problem before on the right side of the screen, which are low pathogenic coronaviruses. So you have to understand that maybe every second, every minute, there's a new mutant that are actually occurring around us, not mutated enough to infect human beings, but that's always a possibility. So you have to understand that. So to just check whether this is really a pandemic, we have a new virus, and it affected a great proportion of the world. We now have 115 million cases in 7.7 billion population, and affecting 219 countries among the 251 countries as of March 3 this year. And also there is evidence that it is under control. In fact, just recently, in the past 2 days, we know that there is a rise in cases in our country right now that we are worried about. So why is it important for us to be vigilant and always be informed? Because this particular pandemic has really affected our lives so much. So we know this is a pandemic, and we know there are pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic transmission, and it affected so many people in the world. Right now, there is really no effective direct cure of the virus. It's just all supportive and medications that are on trial. And it negatively impacted on our economy. A lot of the businesses, the restaurants have closed, and a lot of people lost their jobs already. And there's still a lot to be known about how long the immunity is. And again, now recently we are facing new variants. So the variants are actually the same SARS-CoV-2, now trying again to mutate very quickly to adapt to or to respond to our actions. So the first mutation actually made them able to transmit a little bit better. But the disease doesn't necessarily mean that it's worse, but they are able to transfer to another person very, very quickly. So this is how it has affected the entire world, just to give you a picture of how it looks like now in the world. And like what I said, this happens because we are in close proximity with animals that actually carry viruses, or even viruses or microorganisms around the environment that are not usually pathogenic, may later learn how to infect human beings. So this is due to other changes around us, including demographic and behavioral changes. So we know there's been an increase in flights. We're able to travel so much, so the ability for this new viruses to cross continents and cross countries is there. Of course, there's also an issue of microbial adaptation and change. So if there is a strain to such organisms like environmental waste, for instance, chemicals that we throw into the environment, they try to learn how to mutate. So usually mutations will last for years for them to be able to do that. But now it's beginning to be quite short that this new variants and new infections are emerging. So of course, also breakdown in public health measures. So that's why it's very, very important that the entire world really practices evidence-based means of avoiding infection and not overprotect also in a way that you will jeopardize or increase your risk getting the infection. So after all this set up, emergence of new pathogen can happen, like what happened to us with this Wuhan, what do you call this, Wuhan virus. So just basic information, you have to understand that anywhere you go, transmission happens through this triangle. So mainly from the person who is infected to other people. So wherever you are, whether you're in a hospital or shopping in a grocery or in a mall, you have to understand that other people may be a source of infection in the same way that environment. I just gave an example of the hospital, but basically also outside when you take transportation, if some person, other person cough into that particular area, you can get infected. So just remember this triangle so that you will know how to also help you avoid getting infected. So sometimes through that triangle, you would need what we call subjects that can deliver the infection. So a lot of times, most of the time, it's your hands that actually infect yourself. And this is and hand washing is actually the single most effective way of avoiding getting infected. Sometimes it's the objects that you use. So that's why Dr. Lacson was talking about your bags. Right now, what we use are washable bags or bags that you can spray or disinfect. So in the hospital, it's our stethoscopes. So we need to clean them every after patient. And sometimes transmission needs the help of live objects, live instruments like the mosquito for dengue, for instance, and Japanese encephalitis. So also basic is to understand how SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted. So before, very easily, all infectious agents basically just makes use of one way of transmitting. However, for SARS-CoV-2, we have found out that from an infected individual, most common way of transmission is droplet. When we say droplet, these are large particles that are released when you cough or you sneeze. So because they are heavy, more than 5 microns, they fall off to the ground very easily within 3 to 6 feet. So it doesn't really remain in the air for you to breathe in the particles. So other than that, we know that you can transmit through your hands or through objects around you. I've mentioned that. But these two mechanisms are rare or are not very common. Basically because if you always clean your environment and your hands, that would stop transmission. And this would only happen if you bring those hands or the contamination from your environment through your hands into your men that Dr. Lacson was talking about. So kinakailangan pumasok yung mikrobyo sa mata, sa ilong, sa bibig. So even if you don't have the full gear, you don't have to be necessarily infected. If like from the grocery, you come home, change clothes, take a shower, and you basically kill the organism by washing your clothes. And take note, SARS-CoV-2 is very weak. Kahit soap lang po, patay na siya. So, very easy to kill SARS-CoV-2. So, malaki naman yung laban natin. Unfortunately, unlike other droplet precaution organism, SARS-CoV is special because it's also able to transmit through airborne. When we say airborne, there are particles that are lighter and less than 5 microns. Usually, this would be for measles, chickenpox, or tuberculosis. However, SARS-CoV has gained that ability for the infected to even shed lighter droplets to be suspended in the air for like 3 hours. So it's a limited airborne transmission, not the same as the others that are usually transmitted through airborne. So again, anywhere you go, you are not safe because any person around you can actually carry the virus and infect you. So you have to always keep guard. So everybody's a suspect, no place is safe. So you have to avoid from getting infected. So thank God it's been 1 year. I haven't gotten infected despite the fact of my husband having COVID on the first month. So this was the time nobody knew about the infection, and I actually watched and took care of him at home before he got admitted. So during that time, I was using principles of infection control, and I was literally just using a surgical mask and nothing else. Well, of course, ventilation, hand washing, and all those. I actually had a gun of alcohol I used every time I go into the room where he was. So I isolated him. And then I always go into a COVID ward, of course, in full gear in the hospital. So my practice is quite different from Dr. Lacson in a way that I am hospital-based, as have you seen Melodine telling you, Dr. Melodine telling you where I practice. So luckily, all the setup is present in my hospital. So the very first thing that you would notice that's being done now, even in hospitals or the malls, which is quite annoying, is what we call triaging. So this has been a practice that has been done even in the olden days, basically identifying patients that would need immediate care. So this is like emergency situation type of practice that slowly had been adopted into this problem of COVID. So you basically screen patients for possibility of infection. So this is done in the malls. This is done, of course, in the hospital. So what Dr. Lacson said is taking the temperature, you're answering your questionnaire with regards to your risk of infection, and basically controlling the amount of people in a particular area is being done. So when I say 14-day clearance or health evaluation form, this is what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to reiterate this because there was a time that people are buying this antibody rapid test. So we always want tests that will quickly tell us whether we're sick or not. All these tests you need to understand because not all of these are perfect. So however, there was a study that was done in the Philippines looking at comparing the antibody rapid test, which is really useless. So this is a blood test that's for me has no use in this detecting of sick patients. So you would see the rapid antibody test sensitivity. Sensitivity means the ability of detecting a person who is sick na positive through that test. Specificity naman is the ability to say that the patient is not sick and the patient is really not sick. So the chances of it being correct. You would see that the ability of the standard test, which is the questionnaire only, the one that we are being asked always in the malls, would be 93% versus rapid test, which is 71%. Actually, the rapid test is 50%. So 50% of the time it's wrong, 50% of the time is right. So parang para kayo mo pang gagawin, diba? So I really don't send people to do rapid antibody tests. So it's better for us to clear the patient through the 14-day symptom test. And it's also 98% specific, meaning if the patient doesn't have any risk factors, chances are that patient is not sick of COVID. So granting, patients should be very, very honest. So it's up to you to really influence the patient to tell you the truth. Of course, there are people who are not telling the truth, so you have to have backup mechanisms for that. So this is the rapid 14-day test. So it's just saying for the past 14 days, have you had any exposure or risk involved in COVID, like travel, for instance, or being involved in a outbreak? And second is if you have any symptoms of flu-like symptoms like fever, cough, basically any respiratory. All these patients are like looked into one group and are managed differently in any hospitals or even public places. So they are not allowed to come in. So also, oftentimes I hear questions of whether, na-expose po ako dito sa positive na pasyente, kailangan na po ba ako mag-quarantine? So you have to qualify exposure as high-risk exposure, which means you are 15 minutes or more face-to-face with that patient, meaning within 3 feet or 6 feet na wala kayong protection. So basically, when I say protection, this is your mask and your shield, okay? Or even a mask will do, and which is an appropriate mask. So that's another lecture, which are the appropriate masks. So, and also more than 2 hours staying in the same room. So basically, you're breathing the same air with no proper ventilation is also a no-no. So the issue with SARS-CoV transmission is that it's a game of chances. So there's no perfect 100%. Now you will not get infected. So it's really more of a gradation from poor risk to a high risk. So that's how I tend to advise these people. So it has to be no precaution, what do you call this? No precaution encounter. So like me, for instance, I go in the COVID wards every time. I'm not considered exposed because I have the full gear. Or even if I took care of my husband, I took precaution. So you have to explain to the patient what's the type of precaution you're talking about. So does wearing your mask, your shield, and distancing have evidence? So it does. So that's why the DOH have always been stressing for us to wear this anytime. And this is the minimum required protection for you anywhere, even in the hospital. So unlike Dr. Lacson, who would have to take care of patients who open their mouth, that's very high risk and very close distance. In a regular medical clinic like myself, all I need to have is basically the face mask, the shield, and basically distancing when appropriate, hand washing, and other mechanisms like making sure my ventilation in the clinic is good. So you would see here, this is a study of COVID, a meta-analysis. When we say meta-analysis in medicine, this means that several studies were put together. The results of these studies were put together. And in this case, this meta-analysis was published in Lancet. When an article is published, that means this is peer-reviewed, meaning specialists in the area reviewed your data and made it valid. before it gets published. So it's important that your papers are published. So this is involving 172 trials and research that have been published. They put together the information and it involved 25,700 patients. So you would see this is very, what to call this, the weight is very, very big because it's not based on like 100 people only. There's 25,700 cases. So this is also how you would evaluate vaccine efficacy results. You have to be careful to listen to experts tell you that this vaccine is still useful or not. So you would see here that if you physically distance yourself from others, so that's what I do when I'm in the mall or doing the grocery, I make sure I have at least 3 feet distance from the next person. If they're not practicing that, hindi ka naman puno na hindi ka gagalaw. So you can actually move. You protect yourself by 80%, face mask by 82%, and eye protection by 65%. If you add all of that, you have 90+%, even up to 99% protection that you're not gonna get sick. So I'm happy. It's been a year. I haven't gotten infected, okay? So anywhere you go, even if you really have an emergency, you use the apat dapat ng DOH, which is air ventilation. So when my husband was sick, he was in the room adjacent to mine, only divided by a sliding door. But all his windows are open and my windows are open during daytime. At night, we can have the air conditioning, but when you are outside, like in the village jogging, technically you don't need to wear mask and shield. However, we actually uh, encourage you wearing this because you really don't know when somebody's gonna, you'll meet someone and they started talking to you. That's when you immediately put in your protection. So just to make sure, protect yourself. Anyway, isang taon na natin to ginagawa. So medyo sanay na tayo. So physical distancing is another. Always wear face mask and shield. And always lessen your encounters to 30 minutes or more. Kasi nga, 15 minutes face-to-face, diba? Tas 2 hours yung high risk in the same room. So if you keep everything within 30 minutes, medyo yung chances mo getting infected is not that, strong, okay? Now, in terms of how the practice changed, we really had to adapt, and it's not easy. What we went through, what I went through, and all the frontliners, we basically base our practice through what the government initiates. So this is what we call the community quarantine measures. So there is what we call enhanced community quarantine, wherein they only allow necessary medical visits. So even if we want to see a patient during that time, it won't be allowed because they cannot travel to the hospital. When it was modified enhanced community quarantine, so when medyo naglusan na yung quarantine natin, we were also able to open our clinics. During this time, really, there was very limited well visits, halos zero. Most of the patients we would see were the sick patients, ika nga, mga emergency na hindi pwedeng maghintay. General community quarantine would be limited to a bit more patients that you can see that are well, but generally throughout the time, even until now, lahat po na may symptoms na lagnat or any flu-like symptoms, diretso po talaga sa ER. Hindi ko po tatanggapin sa clinic unless I know the patient and the patient was just recently discharged and I know the cause of the problem. Modified general community quarantines is what we're doing now. So this is when a lot more activities are allowed, and we are seeing patients already that are well, that are probably chronically ill patients that will require your follow-up, especially those who are need vaccination, because I'm a pediatrician. So basically what they control here are they allow are the frontliners and essential workers. So throughout the quarantine measures, sila lang ang pwedeng pumasok. The others will not be. So during the enhanced community quarantine, this is the kasagsagan ng COVID. You will see here Global City and QC having really enclosed areas in the hospital. In fact, the hospital was basically divided into a clean and a dirty area. So there are wards that basically house COVID, and even the ER was split. We had separate ORs. So all the practices are different. So this is me with a resident whenever I go in COVID wards. So like yesterday, I went in. So there are still cases up to now. And we know there was a time wherein all the major hospitals were fully in full capacity for COVID. So iba po ang suot pagka COVID wards or actual COVID patient ang imi-meet nyo. So generally, in a clinic like mine na hindi dental, all I need to wear is basically the mask, the shield, and only add to that if I'm going to expect what you call is droplet, which is what's seen in dental clinic. Kaya sila mas maingat kasi ang risk talaga sa dental clinic is the doctor. The patient do not necessarily need to cover themselves up because siguro the eyes, there's good reason for that. Ako kasi, I just shower immediately when I reach the house. And basically, the patient will be exposed to his own droplets. So he doesn't really need to be fully covered. And the doctor naman has a mask that would avoid contamination. So basically, it's the eyes that needs to be covered. So during this time, there were really no clinics. Sick patients go to the ER. All patients are screened even until now, and only essential medical problems are actually entertained. So this was the time when even us, we were so afraid because our colleagues are dying right and left, and we were so scared to go into the hospital. But we had no choice. We had to do our job, especially po ako, infectious disease. In Quezon City, it was only the two of us seeing all COVID patients. And in global, we were three who were rotating. All the rest of the doctors in pediatrics will let their patients be managed by us until the COVID test becomes negative. So talagang nakakatakot. So when it became modified enhanced community, so when it was enhanced, we hardly had time to do clinics anyway because we saw patients from morning to the afternoon, and we were so tired because I had to go to 2 hospitals. I even begged off seeing patients in Cardinal and Asian. But during the modified enhanced community, this was the time that we started feeling, this was more than 3 months after, the urgency of, yung mga pasyente namin na babies hindi nababakunahan. So I was one of the first one who actually initiated this, and it became nauso after that, which is what I call drive-by vaccination. So I did this because even during this time, some of the doctors are even scared to meet patients because of the risk. So I did this, called all my patients who was comfortable, who wanted to do this. So like what I said, I like open air because open air literally is like putting or diluting your droplets into like the sea. So parang hindi mo kailangan mag-mask actually unless you are in close proximity at ubuhan ka. So it's really, really good if you have open air, even for restaurants. So that's what we do now. So again, I did start telemedicine like what Dr. said. Most of the patients until now are doing telemedicine. And also for patients, I follow up post-admission. Telemedicine is good because if you really do not need to examine the patient, and there are ways to examine the patient like what Dr. Mentioned, you can actually ask the mom to show the affected areas, open their mouth. The only thing is you cannot hear with a stethoscope. So usually cardiologists will have themselves or their patients come in, and there are gadgets for doctors that have been created. Even yung stethoscope that's virtual is actually done. During this time, I had limited times wherein I did house call, which was very scary also. So I only did it for the patients I knew, and yung mga talagang praning ayaw lumabas and I needed to see them. But that was really rare, but I allowed that. So again, for protocols for surgery or pregnancy and delivery in the hospital, we cannot stop that, especially the emergency. So that's why we had divided the whole hospital into two. So hindi po nagmimix. Even yung daanan ng mga pasyente, hiwalay. So we were good. The whole time of the pandemic, St. Luke's did really well in doing all of this. We had so many babies born to COVID positive mothers, and these babies were really, really doing well despite the COVID. They were just babies, normal, and they were marked positive COVID. But they were isolated in a separate NICU. So our nursery were separated. So it pays to have a hospital that has space and has the resources to do this. And all the patients who we admit basically were screened with RT-PCR. Okay. So again, during this time, if the patients will need to see you, they would need travel clearance. So I give them the certification through a sent or virtually, or send it in the phone. Even actually, what do you call this? Not just clearance, even their prescription. So the drugstores will even allow pictures of your prescription. So now it's general community quarantine. I started seeing patients who are well, especially the babies who are just born. I would really need to see and examine them. And as long as you explain to the patients that this is necessary, and you will tell them, teach them the precautions. So to my secretaries, I gave them a lecture on what's done in the clinic. So you would see here, I didn't have any PPE except this, because all you need to really protect in a regular clinic is the men. Okay. I have an air purifier, but really what you basically need to attain ventilation is at least half opened window and an open door. You attain already ventilation that's similar to your open air outside in a village. So I only would wear gloves, would wear a gown if I anticipate what you call this splashes from the patient. So these are the OB gynecologists, surgery, who would look into wound, for instance. Those are when you need all of this. There's a long discussion about UV light. The foot bath is useless. UV light, it has to be the right range, and it only covers areas that get hit by the light. So yung kabila nun, hindi rin sterile. So I would rather do surface disinfection and disinfection of my phone rather than UV light. Because I would know which areas I cleaned. So every time I have an alcohol beside me, in the car, in my pocket, spray that I would use. So luckily my hospital has all the supplies all over the place. So it's not easy to actually look for them. So again, during this time, elective surgery is already allowed with all possible clearance. So usually we clear these patients if they're not COVID, because we too knew the effect during the height of the COVID. There were many sick healthcare workers, frontliners, and we had to assign 1 to 2 wards just to house them, to quarantine them and take care of them. So again, this was a more loose time. So this is current practice. So what's next after this? But looks like we cannot go further, or we cannot go much looser than this time because of the variants that are going or coming. And also the numbers of the cases are going up. So next level should be modified general community quarantine, wherein most more activities are allowed, even church, even watching movies, face-to-face in medical schools. or other schools. Some of the schools were allowed face-to-face this week, but they pulled that out again because nga tumataas yung cases in NCR and other areas of the country. So hopefully non-urgent cases will be allowed and more relaxed control would be done. But again, this is on hold this week just because of the rise in cases and the presence of the variants, two variants now in the Philippines. We are now doing the vaccination rollout. This is not a one-shot answer. That's why even if you get vaccinated, this is not the reason to stop all your precaution. Continue to do this. We haven't reached the point wherein we can relax. So you have to remember that. So we have to adjust the quarantine measures and the things that we do in the hospital depending on what the government tells us. So just to let you know, even there's vaccination and 250 million vaccinated all over the world. US, I know UK and Israel are the ones leading in the world. Despite that, that's only not even 1% of the entire global population, only 0.69% of the 7.7 billion people in the world has been vaccinated. So really, that's nothing because we expect to attain 70% coverage of immunity, whether that's natural or through vaccination. So 70% of the world, if the RO or the RO of the infection is basically the number of people infected from a single case. So the RO of COVID is mga 2 to 3. So if that number varies, so ibig sabihin nun, pag ako infected, generally may 2 to 3 akong mai-infect na tao. So generally, we want the R naught down to 0 or 1 or better to not allow more cases. So yung sinasabi kong attainment of 70% of the population immune. So ilang billion yun, di ba? Na vaccinated or nagkaroon ng natural disease bago tayo pwedeng mag-relax or to say na controlled na yung infection. And we are really so far from that. You would see this graph I just pulled out. I think this is March this week. And you would see those countries that has vaccinated the most, which I said this is United Kingdom, blue is United States, light blue is European Union, and Israel is green. You would see vaccination started around December in these countries, and numbers are going down. They haven't reported officially that this is due to the vaccination, but it looks good after the vaccination, especially because I think they haven't really vaccinated enough. US now has shortage of the vaccine despite them ordering twice their necessary numbers. UK ordered 3 times, and these countries produce the vaccine. They have the first option to get the supply. Tayo, wala tayong ginawang vaccine, nang hihingi o nanghihintay lang tayo ng libre. And where is the Philippines here? Philippines is this maroon. Our cases are not so bad, but again, our cases are also not going down significantly. So that's why if you have the opportunity, I know right now vaccination is only for the frontliners, get yourself vaccinated. So existing issue, COVID is still a global problem. It hasn't been solved until now. More than 200 countries are still struggling to control it. Brazil's cases now are going up again, so they're panicking because it seems like we have controlled it for a while. Because of the variants, cases are going up again. So vaccines are available, like what I said, only less than 1% of the whole global population has been vaccinated. And there's new variants coming, UK, South African, Brazilian. There's even Cebu variant now that's being seen but not confirmed yet. So we need to really adjust on a daily basis. Sometimes new information come in within the day. Vaccine is only one preventive measures. You need to really still continue to wear the proper precaution and handle them well. The problem with putting all these PPEs, and you don't need to wear these gowns in the malls, because when you remove them and you don't know how to remove them, it's additional risk. I say that all the UV, the what do you call this, air filters, these are additional things that you need to clean and maintain. And the one who's going to clean this is the one at risk. When they studied hospitals with COVID and used this, you would see where they detected the virus, it's in the filter. So unless you know how to use these things, and if it really significantly will change your chances in the area, know that ventilating is already enough. Proper disinfection with the right disinfectants is enough at a minimum. Okay, so I don't have those. I only use the air filter as additional, but I really don't need it because binigay sa akin. I have over a dozen gowns gifted to me. It's all in the cabinet. I'm not using them because I haven't found use for it in my clinic. I only put in the full gear inside a COVID ward. Okay, so what to expect? The vaccination rollout would continue. We will continue apat dapat and hand washing, masking, face shield, and distancing. We can slowly go back to normal activities, but not yet. I even do not see it in the near future yet. And definitely we need more information about the virus. And then now variants are coming. We need more information about that. Although the genetic material is known, I'm sure there are undetected variants that are going around. So we need to be informed and we cannot relax. So this is not yet the time to relax. Okay, now I'm ready to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Navoa-Ng, for that very extensive, interesting, very informative lecture.
Thank you.
Natawa lang ako kasi how I wish I belong to that 30 countries that do not have COVID-19.
True,
Kasi
diba?
mentioned 219 in 251 countries. That's a lot.
Some of them are really tiny countries na hindi masyado nagta-travel to. Kaya very, at this time, I guess useful na hindi ka sikat na pinupuntahan.
Yeah.
Diba?
Oo
Yes,
nga,
yes.
tama. Tapos as we adapt to the COVID, as people adapt to the COVID-19, COVID-19 is also adapting to us. So
Yes,
mabilisan
anything.
tayo.
Correct.
Yeah.
So take note of their mutation. Transmission talaga. Ang talino, di ba? And these are single-celled organism tayo, multi-celled, and natatalo tayo. And it's the entire world struggling. And we're still, feel ko to so emotional about it kasi sobra talaga yung dinaanan namin. I didn't even post the pictures that were really bad. I was quarantined because of my husband, and then I'm getting all these questions 24/7. My close friends dying, I had to take care of people through the phone from all over the world, plus the patients here. So toxic talaga. So parang kakapagod. Yun yung parang nung fellowship natin, yung humihiwala yung kaluluwa mo sa pagod.
Yes. Tama.
Yes.
Oo. We have to be, kumbaga, everybody has to be unanimous.
Contributing,
Yes, and contributing talaga.
Kasi you would see now when you drive out, parang walang pandemic, diba? So parang,
Right.
kung hindi importante, wag na lang sana lumabas muna.
Right. And now we have the vaccine. Actually, for the longest time, we've been waiting for the vaccine. And then the vaccine is here now and people are hesitating naman. So parang, ano kaya ang next?
Just to let the audience know, I had myself vaccinated this Wednesday. I even had 2 of my children vaccinated with Dengue vaccine. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to vaccinate my entire family with Dengue vaccine because it was pulled out. So that's another whole lecture. So you have to ask experts, not listen to fake news. Ngayon na naman, diba, they're just in the news Okta group, there were a statement they retracted kasi they have to be careful with the words chosen when you
Right.
get interviewed. Mahirap din naman if it's like this na immediately on TV ka and it's difficult to answer and sometimes you don't know the level of understanding of the audience. So you have to be very careful with your words on how things are.
Yes, yes. Dr. Ra, we have a couple of questions here, actually valid questions. Interesting. She said she recently gave birth and is presently breastfeeding. Is it safe to go for the COVID-19 vaccine?
The quick answer to that is there's no evidence. However, studies in animals, even for pregnant women, pregnant animals in that case, wala namang nag-light up na dangerous yung vaccine. So if you are a frontliner, you should weigh the risk because if you get sick of the COVID vaccine, there's really a risk of dying. So tingnan yung kanyang risk factors. If you're not a frontliner, you're not even in the parang listahan eh. You're not gonna get vaccinated. So right now, the vaccination is really should be following the tiers. So there's an A, B, C group. A1 is kami, frontliners in hot zones. Meaning, hindi lahat ng doktor dapat nakaka-receive muna eh. Uunahin yung talagang who takes care of COVID patients. So, you would see posts na hindi ganon eh. Yung nasusunod kahit doktor na hindi nagra-round. So, qualify nga yung text sa St. Luke's. It has to be hot zone, active. Kasi we all know naman nung time ng COVID, nawala yung medyo may edad, hindi nagra-rounds. Siyempre, protection sa kanila. And then, ayaw nila mag-round sa COVID. So, bagsak talaga sa amin. So, pagod na pagod talaga kami. So, pero ngayon ng vaccination, biglang hot zone daw sila. So, parang natatawa na lang ako minsan. So, yun nga, if you're lactating or pregnant, you have to weigh your risks. As you can see, many of our colleagues in St. Luke's, immunocompromised or may cancer, nagpaturok. So because okay naman, there's no contraindication in that. Lactating lalo, nakalabas na yung baby eh. So parang okay lang. Less than pregnant.
Yeah, thank you, Doctora, for covering for us. I'm one of them. Yeah. There's a question here. Why, despite the low effectivity of the vaccine, we still choose Sinovac?
If you would ask me, or probably any other doctors who knows the data, right now is an emergency status. Okay, and I had myself injected with Sinovac, just to let you know. The vaccines cannot be compared parang what's the term? Head to head, because I always explain, it's like when you get applications from student to get to Chiang Kai-shek. They would all attain a minimal requirement. But of course, the student is better, maganda yung personality nito, ito may record na bagsak dito. There are good points and bad points to the vaccines. If this was just an illness na sipon, we won't make a vaccine. We don't even need to vaccinate. So literally, what we're avoiding is not getting sick of COVID. What we actually don't want to happen is getting to the ICU, getting intubated, and dying from it. For all the vaccines, they're equivalent in that aspect. So ako, being there every time with my risk, I would rather get protected now. So the 50% of Sinovac was a single study in Brazil among healthcare workers. If you look at data, healthcare workers, of course, would be more exposed. So baka kaya bumaba yung numbers nila. So I dare Pfizer and Moderna be used in healthcare workers alone and see what the number is. Sinovac has a Turkey study in the regular community at 91, 94, 95. Pare-pareho lang yan for me. But like what I said, they all have equivalent ability of 80 to 100% avoiding you from dying. So kahit magkasakit ako ngayon, at least alam ko, hindi ako mamamatay. Ang isa pa nilang difference is that iba-iba yung technology. Pfizer Moderna technologies, mRNA, mas madaming anaphylaxis, zero sa Sinovac. Technology-wise, is probably less than 2 decades age. The technology of Sinopharm and Sinovac is 200 years old, used in other existing vaccines. Another reason that I took it because, of course, nauna yung mga mRNA because nung gumagawa sila ng vaccine, ayaw nila i-handle sa lab yung mikrobyo na buo. Kasi kakatakot, diba? Kailangan hindi ka mahawa ka sa laboratory, ang hirap nun. So level 3 laboratory dapat. So walang gumawa ng whole cell vaccine. Sinopharm and Sinovac are whole cell. All the others used lang the spike protein. So ito yung cell, yung spike protein lang. So the whole cell has the entire genome or genes of the vaccine. So for me, if you present the whole cell to your immune system, it won't just react to the spike because it will react to the entire cell. So for me, logically, so don't quote me, this is not, so the reason why we're so ingat in deciding which one, because walang study. If I say this now, and oh, sinabi mo to, wala naman study. So I'm just telling you the concept of immunology and the concept of vaccination. I would rather have a whole cell na patay because the whole genome will give me a better chance for variants. Maiba man yung spike protein ng variants, meron akong immune response dun sa the rest of the cell. And there are also non-measurable, not non-measurable, difficult to measure responses through vaccine. And that's the T-cell response, may mga cytokines, blah, blah, na medyo high-tech immunology na not measurable. Kung measurable man, nasa research lab, which is not done commercially. So the one we can measure only is blood test for antibodies, and that's only a part of your response to that vaccine. Ano pa ba ang punto? So yun, walang masyadong side effects. So that's why, and also I want to be protective now. So even if 50% siya, my protection is still better than no vaccine, which is zero. Okay, so 50% now, and then I am not assured. Maybe kung US ako nakatira or UK, I can be choosy. Yeah. Pero I cannot be choosy now. And again, all of them attained the minimum requirement of having finished the phase 3 and have the EUA approval. So trust in the system. Strict po ang system ng paggawa ng vaccine. And it's not true na shortcut yung paggawa. It was only faster because people invested on it. Data was out. China already shared the genome of the SARS-CoV very early on. Shinorten yung observation time, but know that in the past years, almost all side effects occurred in all known vaccines occurred in the first 3 months. We are already on the 6th month of most of the new vaccines now. Walang nakikitang red tag or warning na pangit siya. So I'm vaccinated, 1 dose.
So theoretically, mas advantageous din to get the vaccine.
Isa pa lang ito, nakalimutan ko. Yes, definitely. Ang isa pang nakalimutan ko sabihin, again, this is not proven. It's not proven in studies, but by vaccine technology or principle, I am predicting that we will need revaccination later on. Kasi nga nag-mutate na nga ito eh. So that means kailangan gumawa ng bago, very close. So parang flu every year. Probably not as frequent as flu. Siguro more than a year, we don't know yet. So far, we have information at 8 months. We have the immune response for a natural infection, yung nagka-COVID. For vaccines, we have evidence of 6 months, at least 3 months for most of it. But kung magre-revaccinate, I would choose. I can choose, diba? Kasi maraming supplies. For now, na walang supply. Plus, I'm also predicting. So, you can quote me to this, but it's not based on study. You can interchange because by principle, it's the same antigen, the spike protein. So like pag nawala ng 6-in-1, diba, we give, or 5-in-1, we give the 6-in-1 because
Right.
it's the same antigen. So hindi lang sumasagot ang experts na absolute because hindi pa siya stinady. Pero that's by principle, I think that's what's gonna happen.
May follow-up question po. Will the present available vaccine be able to cover the UK South African variant strain?
There are a few of them already ongoing studies, and the ones that have protection would be Pfizer, Moderna. Sinovac has also. Less ang AstraZeneca. I think Novavax has and Janssen, but not out yet, and the numbers are low. So you have to understand that even if they say this at this point, pag nadagdagan yung population number ng tinitest nila later, baka mag-adjust yung numbers. So you have to understand that this still works for the first virus, yung unang-una na hindi mutated. 58 cases pa lang naman yung variant sa Pilipinas eh. So, iisipin mo ba yung variant o ma-protect ka dun sa all other cases na original virus. So, ma-protect na ako ngayon, diba? Tsaka ko na i-worry yung variant. Wala pang ang gumagawa ng vaccine for the variants eh. But according to who was interviewed, I think Pfizer, they can change the component in 100 days to make a new for the variant. So they need 100 days at least to make a vaccine for the new variant. So it's gonna come. So parang flu. So tsaka na ako maging choosy, diba?
Yeah.
Gusto ko protect ngayon at may baseline antibody ako. Eh yung mga ibang pasyente nga na nagdo-donate, so my husband donated plasma, bumababa talaga yung kanilang levels ng immunity. So bakuna na rin siya para ma-boost.
There's a question here. Are rapid tests accurate? I think medyo na-mention na kanina.
Well, they have to understand or be clear what the rapid test they are talking about. So the one I'm talking about is rapid test blood. Na nasa kit yung parang pregnancy test. Blood test to determine serologic response or antibody, IgG or IgM, is useless for me because none of them are validated that has reached the country. They are FDA approved, but that's not equivalent to validation. Okay, sayang ang pera. So yung mga kumpanya na bumili nun, nagtapon lang ng pera because hindi talaga siya accurate. Ang isa pang rapid test, is the antigen test. Okay, yun yung isa-swab ka pa rin, pero sa kit ilalagay. So, lateral flow technology pa rin yung ginagawa. This is better because it detects the presence of the antigen. Ang problema kasi dun sa antibody, it will depend on your response and the sample, etc. The timing. This is the only disease na 2 weeks after the illness tataas ang antibody. So if you did do it at that time, mali na, diba? So while yung antigen, talagang kung sick ka at nandiyan sa ilong mo yung virus, what do you call this? Talaga, pag nag-positive, totoo yun. Ang only difference niya sa RT-PCR, which is the gold standard, RT-PCR detects the gene, the DNA, RNA gene. Okay, so medyo specific yun. Kumbaga sa spelling, pag may maling spelling dyan, hindi yan magpa-positive. Yung antigen test, tinetest niya is some protein, part of the virus. So pwedeng may kasimilar lang siya ng konti sa ibang coronavirus, pwedeng mag-positive. So you also need to check which rapid antigen test you're testing. So that's one. Second is sa RT-PCR, ina-amplify, meaning maliit lang yung number ng virus mo sa lalamunan, papadamihin yan ng machine at magpa-positive kahit mababa yung load. Ang antigen requires several times higher viral load to detect. So pag nag-positive ang antigen, totoo yun. Meron kang COVID. Pero pag nag-negative, pwedeng low ang number ng virus compared sa RT-PCR na ma-detect. Ang argument naman ng producers ng antigen test, this was actually made to make it easy for the people na super mura na parang $1 daw, na parang coffee maker, bago ka umalis ng bahay, i-check mo kasi $1 lang ang cost. Pag wala ka, so true that for that day. So next day, uulitin mo ulit kasi mura lang. And they said that yung detection point daw ng antigen, rapid antigen test, it's at the level na you're infectious. So yung RT-PCR might detect you as positive pero hindi ka pa infectious, ang baba pa ng levels mo. So the antigen test advantage is that yung madedetect ng antigen test is talagang nakakahawa na kasi mataas yung kanyang viral load. So those are the differences. So but always ask the expert to interpret the results because they are both affected by timing, type of sample, whether severe your case or mild. Pag asymptomatic, konti ang viral levels. So you have to ask an expert to interpret results.
Okay. Meron pang question dito. Is there a particular vaccine which you prefer and why?
Siguro if you're going to choose, I will actually choose kung ano yung best for me. Wala akong allergies. So pwede din siguro ang Pfizer and Moderna. Kahit may allergy risk, okay ako doon. And they have the higher nga, what do you call this, efficacy. Efficacy means is the ability to produce the antibodies among those who received. It's not really avoidance of getting infected, which is the effectiveness in real world. And because Pfizer and Moderna has the most studies. But again, because it's so early, baka maiba pa. So for me, like ngayon, kung AstraZeneca and Sinovac, if kunyari may parang pipiliin ko pa rin Sinovac because wholesale nga siya eh. Tapos wala masyadong side effects. Wala ako at all, kahit pain, wala. Tapos yung AstraZeneca, so there are vaccines na pwede sa more than 60. So hindi rin ako doon pasok. So parang kahit alin pwede for me kasi nga emergency Right. So siguro if I would choose yung may pinakamaraming studies na okay, which is Pfizer and Moderna. Eh wala naman dito. So kaya lang mRNA din, medyo kudaw ako doon kasi parang 10 to 20 years old lang yun eh. Tsaka walang ibang vaccines out except Ebola ata ang gumamit ng ganong principles. Pero brilliant technology yung mRNA.
Even my husband, he got his Sinovac yesterday. Parang wala naman.
Wala, di ba? Wala. Pero meron syempre, may iba-iba tayo. I mean, merong ibang magre-react. May nag-anaphylaxis nga sa Asian daw eh. So, pero doktor siya, so in-injection na niya yung sarili niya, so okay na siya.
Nag-epic ka agad.
Pero ang sabi ng allergologist, hindi daw yun dapat nangyari kasi 7 hours. Anaphylaxis should be immediate. Yes. So baka nag-react siya sa iba. 7 hours after eh. So parang medyo questionable din.
And I also tell my patients actually, even paracetamol nga, merong nagre-react eh. So parang it's not the exception rather than the rule.
Yes. And always, in all vaccines, complications, side effects are more with the actual natural disease than the vaccine. So what will you take? Yung konting sakit sa braso, naglagnat, o ma-admit, mamamatay at mai-intubate? Ayoko kaya ma-intubate. Sakit nun, diba? Ayoko nga magpa-RT-PCR, ang sakit-sakit kaya.
Yes. Don't be choosy nga. May vaccine.
Correct.
There's a question here, magbabago ba daw ang DNA hanggang next generation?
Again, this is like basic knowledge, biology, and the doctors here would know. It takes really a while for a certain organism to mutate. But again, this is like modern times. We don't know what's happening. Like what I explained kanina, it's really the strain from the environment. Siguro itong mga SARS-CoV nito, sabi nila, naku, itong mga to dami-daming ginagawa, hindi na kami maka-spread. So because of that strain, maybe it's faster now, but it's difficult to predict how long. So yung question niya kung nag-change nga kasi may variant. But when you say variant, it's really very slight difference lang from the original. Kaya nga hindi siya ganun katindi yung difference na hindi mag-a-act yung vaccine. So
I think ang question niya is kung mag-change yung DNA ng body.
Pag dun sa mRNA, no.
No.
The mRNA technique has been shown in many talks and videos na it's incomplete part of the cell, and if you would study biology, the mRNA, after it does its job of delivering the message, kaya nga mRNA, M is messenger, so it brings the code of the protein that needs to be produced, which in this case is the spike protein. It disappears, it disintegrates, and our body was designed so well by God that any foreign body, re-reacta natin. So yung minsan yung sinasabi nila, baka daw mag-overproduce yung DNA, etc., etc. Hindi yung vaccine ang may problema doon, yung system mo ang may problema. If you overreact, it's your immune system. Wag mo i-blame yung vaccine. So, nagdi-disintegrate in a few hours, and it was already mentioned by many experts all throughout the world. You're not gonna be affected in terms of change yung DNA. Nope, that's not true.
Doktora, due to time constraint, we know that you are very busy. We'll just entertain 5 more. Okay lang po.
Sige.
5 more.
May 5 pa ba? Ang dami.
Actually, more pa. We'll just answer the other one. Kasi the other one,
Sure.
got infected. Is it still advisable to take the vaccine? Yes.
Yes, because nga may variants, and there are only 7 documented reinfection all throughout the world. And you need to do RNA studies, gene studies to know it's a new infection. Kaya lang hindi naman natago yung una mong infection, so it's difficult to say. So we still advise because nagwe-wane. Looks like it nagwe-wane yung antibody mo. So yes.
And we still don't know until when the antibodies will stay in. So
correct. Even for the vaccine, we don't really know yet when revaccination for another 2 doses will happen. So it's we have to wait.
Can a person taking maintenance medicine for blood sugar avail the vaccine? Thank you po, and keep safe. God bless.
Yes. Yes, anyone who has any comorbidities are actually high risk. So you need to be vaccinated. You're recommended to be vaccinated. But all those problems, hypertension, diabetes, or whatever, even cancer or immune compromised state, needs to be maintained well. So dapat umiinom ng gamot to maintain your blood sugar. So kailangan optimum health. Kasi logically, you need your body in good condition to respond to the vaccine so that ma-maximize yung effect or yung response mo sa vaccine. So yes, you can take.
Even po yung mga may allergies not taking medication?
Yes, all those with allergies from food, drugs, other medications can take it as long as there's precaution. So what they do is you are observed at least 30 minutes after the shot. The only contraindication, absolute, is allergy to the COVID vaccine on the first shot. You don't get, or allergy to the components of the vaccine, which is on all kinds of vaccine anyway, which is the polyethylene glycol, which is the parang part of the vaccine ng Pfizer at ng Moderna. It's not in Sinovac, it's not in AstraZeneca.
Yeah, for the first dose, no really absolute contraindication.
Yes.
How about for the senior citizens daw po? What's the recommended vaccine?
Okay, not all vaccines have finished studies for the elderly. So most of it is until 60, 65, and lower range is 16 to 18. But ongoing po yung studies for elderly, not yet published. So like what I said, Pfizer, Moderna is okay. Yung AstraZeneca is indicated for elderly. I think there are a few more, Novavax and Janssen. But again, these are much earlier pa na study, hindi pa nila napapublish. So, but I'm thinking, Sinovac also released initial information na it should be okay. Kasi nagkakagulo yung mga reports sa Sinovac, kaya nga parang ang dami nag-aalanganin, pero they released very few, 300 na tao. So kung happy kayo sa 300, but I'm again guessing because others are of the same antigen. Generally, if the other vaccines are okay, it should be okay. So you would see Sinovac injected to Dr. Kwanang, other elderlies, 80 years, 81 na siya, 82, ganyan. So the only reason why it's not allowed for a certain age group is walang study, but it doesn't mean it's not okay. Okay, so for now, follow muna yung recommendations para for safety.
We'll have the last question here. Saliva test.
What's the question?
How about, Doctora, the saliva test? What's
okay.
your thoughts on this?
There are several studies done on saliva test. As a sample source, it's equivalent to nasopharyngeal. So it's very good. There was even a test wherein the saliva tested positive, the nasopharyngeal negative. But then again, you have to qualify kasi yung saliva is a sample. Anong klaseng test yung ginawa? So Hong Kong, for instance, is using saliva test in the airport. So it's the rapid. So dudura ka sa tube, tas ira-rapid test nila. So again, rapid test is generally less sensitive than an RT-PCR, which is a machine. May technician, may different stages. Although may automated na yung mas mahal, which is 2,000 more, pero you get the results in an hour. Yung automated kasi maraming steps yung ginagawa ng RITM. That's why minsan one day, minsan 1 week, no araw, diba? So saliva as a sample is good. Know which test is being used to detect the antigen, or is it the RNA? So you have to know the principle of the test as well.
Okay. Thank you, Doctora. We would like to hold Doctora Ng, kaya lang I know she's busy. So for your mga other questions, just email us at CKSC at clinic@cksc.edu.ph, and then we'll try to answer them. Doctora, thank you very much for your time. Do you have a last note or any
So thank you also for having me. I really love being able to do this because I feel like the lay people, our families, I even do this for the church. So parang because it's difficult for people who do not have medical background to understand kung mga doktor nga hilong-hilo na yan, dami-dami kong text. Paano pa kaya yung hindi nag-biology or hindi. So I really like doing this. So if you recorded it, you can spread it out. And I also appreciate being here. It's an honor again. Just always stay guard, listen to the current news, check whether your information is right before you believe them. Kasi most of them, pag sensationalized yan, most likely hindi yan totoo. Look at the source, see if it's validated.
Okay. Thank you once again, Dr. Ng, for your time in sharing your expertise with us.